My name is Emily Carter. I'm 38 years old, and I never thought the deepest wound in my life would come from the very woman who gave birth to me. But on the day of my custody hearing, my own mother took the stand and called me unfit to be a parent. The gavel struck once, echoing across the family courtroom as the bailiff swore in my mother, Linda Carter. She smoothed her neat gray skirt, lifted her chin, and began her testimony with a steady voice that carried too much confidence for what she was about to do. "Your Honor, my daughter has never been stable," she declared. "She can barely hold a job. She's been in and out of therapy, always restless, always disappearing, and I don't think she should have custody of my granddaughter at all." The words sliced through me, each one sharper than the last. I sat at the defendant's table in my navy blazer and ivory blouse, my hands folded tightly together. My brown hair was pulled back into a bun, the same practical style I'd worn for years. The pale band on my finger where my wedding ring once rested seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights, as if mocking me for believing marriage would ever protect me. Across the aisle, my ex-husband Daniel leaned back in his chair, smirking like a man who already believed victory was his. His lawyer, a polished shark named Richard Monroe, nodded approvingly at my mother's every word. Their plan was working, an ambush that used my own mother as their star witness. "She's never been able to provide stability," Linda continued, warming to her performance. "Emily disappears for days at a time. She claims she's working, but I've never seen evidence of steady employment. My granddaughter Sophie deserves better. She needs a father with a good career, a safe home, and real support." My chest tightened as I glanced toward the front row of the gallery. 9-year-old Sophie sat with my sister Monica, her small hands twisting nervously in her lap. Her dark eyes were wide, flicking between her grandmother and me, as though trying to make sense of why the people she loved most were tearing each other apart. Monica avoided my gaze, her silence cutting almost as deeply as our mother's betrayal. Judge Helena Brooks watched from the bench, her face unreadable, her dark robes concealing whatever judgment she might be forming. She and I had crossed paths professionally more than once, but today she was not a colleague. She was the one person who could decide whether my daughter stayed with me or was taken away. And as my mother's voice rang out, painting me as unstable, secretive, and incapable, I sat in silence. 15 years of experience had taught me the value of timing. I would let them build their case, brick by brick, word by word, and when the moment came, I would bring it all down. My mother's voice grew stronger with every sentence, as though each accusation against me gave her more power. "She lives in a cramped little apartment downtown," Linda said, her tone sharp with disdain. "She drives an old car that breaks down every few months. She can barely afford school supplies for Sophie. Meanwhile, Daniel has a beautiful home in Maplewood, a stable income, and a family that can support him in raising a child properly." Her words spread like poison, filling the courtroom with quiet murmurs. I caught sight of Daniel's family sitting proudly on the left side of the gallery, his parents, his 2 sisters, even his aunt, all nodding along in rehearsed agreement. They looked smug, as if they'd already rehearsed their victory celebration. My side of the courtroom looked nearly empty by comparison. Only 2 of my closest friends, co-workers who had taken precious time off to support me, sat watching in silence. They knew the truth about my life, my work, the sacrifices I had made, but their presence was a faint whisper against the loud judgment of my own family. "Furthermore," my mother pressed on, "Emily has always been secretive about her so-called job. She disappears for long stretches, says she's working on something important, but she never explains. For all we know, she could be mixed up in something dangerous, even illegal. I'm terrified my granddaughter could be put in harm's way." The buzzing in the gallery grew louder, people whispering, trading glances, some of them shaking their heads. Each word seemed to weigh on me, not because it was true, but because it came from her. My mother. The woman who had once held me in her arms when I was sick, who had braided my hair before school. Now she stood just feet away, dismantling my reputation with an ease that was almost frightening. I thought back to the last 2 years since the divorce, how I'd balanced Sophie's homework, late-night fevers, and morning drop-offs with my demanding cases. How I'd fought through exhaustion, through loneliness, through moments of despair, all while making sure my daughter never went without love or stability. Judge Helena Brooks sat completely still, her eyes fixed on my mother, her hands folded in front of her. Her face gave nothing away. No flicker of recognition, no hint of sympathy. She was the embodiment of neutrality. And in that moment, I both respected her and feared her. Daniel's lawyer stood, his voice smooth and commanding. Your Honor, the testimony speaks for itself. The child's best interests would be far better served in the care of her father, who offers not only financial security, but also stability. Ms. Carter's erratic lifestyle and questionable employment make her unfit to provide a safe, consistent home environment. I sat perfectly still, my expression calm. Let them think I was cornered. Let them think their little play was working. They had no idea what storm was waiting just beyond those courtroom doors. Daniel's lawyer adjusted his tie, savoring the moment as if the case had already been won. He strode across the floor with calculated confidence, stopping only a few feet from the judge. Your Honor, Richard Monroe said, this is not a complicated case. My client, Daniel Wright, provides a stable, nurturing environment. He has a successful career as a financial consultant, a beautiful home in Maplewood, and the unwavering support of his family. Ms. Carter, on the other hand, has shown a pattern of instability. She vanishes for long periods, works in secrecy, and refuses to disclose what she actually does for a living. That secrecy is not just concerning, it's dangerous when the welfare of a child is at stake. The gallery hummed in agreement. I heard the whispers, the faint gasps, even a soft chuckle from someone in Daniel's row. All of it pressed against me like a wave, but I refused to let it move me. I had sat in courtrooms for too many years to be rattled by a performance. My eyes flicked toward Sophie. Her small shoulders slumped, and her lips trembled as if she were holding back tears. That sight alone nearly broke me. She didn't deserve to be caught in this war of words, used as a weapon in her father's and grandmother's campaign. Judge Brooks raised her eyes from her notes and looked at me directly. Her voice was measured, calm, professional. Ms. Carter, she said, you've heard the allegations. They concern your employment, your financial stability, and your ability to provide for your daughter. Would you like to respond? The room stilled, all eyes shifting toward me. I rose slowly, deliberately, every movement controlled. I smoothed my blazer, pressed my palms against the table for a moment, then stepped forward. Yes, Your Honor, I said, my voice even. I would like to respond. But first, with the court's permission, I'd like to call a witness to address those concerns directly. Daniel's lawyer turned, caught off guard. Your Honor, no witness was disclosed in advance. This is highly irregular. I met his glare without flinching. The witness became available only this morning. His testimony is relevant, and I believe it will bring clarity to the questions being raised about my employment. Judge Brooks tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Very well. This court values truth above procedure. You may call your witness. A collective murmur rippled through the room. Daniel shifted uneasily in his chair, whispering something urgent to his lawyer. I walked slowly toward the heavy wooden doors at the back of the courtroom. My pulse remained steady. I had waited patiently for this moment. They thought they had me cornered, but they were about to learn the truth. I placed my hand on the door handle, turned it, and opened the door wide. The heavy courtroom doors creaked open, and a tall figure stepped inside. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, his silver hair neatly combed, his stride commanding immediate respect. The atmosphere shifted instantly. An audible gasp rippled through the gallery as people craned their necks to see who had just entered. I turned back toward the bench, my voice carrying clear and steady. Your Honor, I would like to call Chief Justice Nathaniel Cole to the stand. The silence that followed was electric, broken only by a sharp intake of breath from my mother. Her confident posture faltered, her eyes widening in confusion before narrowing in disbelief. Daniel's lawyer froze mid-note, his pen slipping from his hand. Chief Justice Cole nodded respectfully to Judge Brooks, then stepped forward, every movement deliberate. He approached the witness stand, placed his hand on the Bible, and was sworn in. The sight of him standing there, towering with the authority of the highest judicial office in the state, was enough to send waves of unease through the opposing side. "Chief Justice Cole," I began, my voice formal, "could you please identify me for the court?" He looked directly at me, then turned to address the judge. "This is the Honorable Emily Carter, Associate Justice of the State Supreme Court. She has served on the bench with distinction for the past 7 years." A hush fell over the courtroom. Every whisper, every murmur died instantly. I caught the expression on Daniel's face. His smirk had vanished, replaced by something close to panic. His lawyer frantically shuffled through his briefcase, clearly searching for information that was never there. My mother's lips parted as if to object, but no words came out. She sat frozen, pale, as though the ground had just disappeared beneath her. "And could you describe the nature of my responsibilities?" I asked, keeping my tone professional, unwavering. "Justice Carter presides over some of the most complex criminal and civil cases in this state," Chief Justice Cole replied firmly. "She chairs our Judicial Ethics Committee, sits on our appellate review for capital cases, and has authored landmark decisions in family law and child welfare." Gasps echoed again from the gallery. I turned to glance at Sophie. Her wide, astonished eyes were locked on me, her small mouth slightly open. For the first time in weeks, I saw awe instead of fear on her face. I turned back to the bench, my voice steady. "Your Honor, I believe this clarifies any questions regarding my employment status." Judge Brooks leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving me. The shift in the room was undeniable. The power no longer belonged to Daniel or my mother. It was mine. The ambush had just collapsed. Chief Justice Cole's words hung in the air like a verdict no one had expected. For a long moment, the courtroom was utterly silent, every person processing the reality that the woman they had just labeled unstable and secretive was, in fact, one of the highest legal authorities in the state. I clasped my hands together and stepped closer to the stand. "Thank you, Chief Justice. I have just a few more questions." He inclined his head. "Of course. Could you speak to the nature of the cases I've presided over?" I asked. His voice was calm, steady, authoritative. "Justice Carter has overseen some of our state's most complex criminal trials. She's authored opinions on cases that are now taught in law schools across the country. She has chaired the Commission on Judicial Integrity, ensuring that judges uphold the highest standards. And in the area of family law, she's written landmark rulings that have reshaped how custody cases are handled to protect the welfare of children." The words struck their target. I could almost feel Daniel shrinking in his seat, his shoulders curling forward, his smug confidence dissolving. "And Chief Justice," I pressed, "could you address the matter of my financial standing?" He nodded. "Justice Carter earns an annual salary of $190,000, not including her judicial benefits. She owns her downtown penthouse outright and maintains a secondary residence in the Blue Ridge Mountains. Her financial disclosures are, as required, matters of public record. There is no question of her stability." My mother's complexion drained to ash. The confidence she had wielded so boldly minutes ago was gone, replaced by raw disbelief. She shook her head slightly, as though she could deny reality simply by refusing to accept it. I turned to face the judge. "Your Honor, for 7 years, I have separated my professional life from my personal one. It wasn't out of shame, it was out of love. I wanted my daughter to grow up without the weight of my position on her shoulders, without the scrutiny that comes from being a judge's child. I chose modesty, not secrecy." My voice caught for a moment as I looked at Sophie, who sat straighter now, her eyes shining with something like pride. "I lived simply, I drove an older car, I avoided parading my title, because I wanted her to understand humility, not entitlement." Daniel suddenly leaned forward, his voice breaking the silence. I thought she was just a clerk. She said she worked at the courthouse. I never—" He stopped himself, realizing the absurdity of his own words. The gallery shifted, people exchanging incredulous looks. Married for nearly a decade, and he had never cared enough to ask. The truth was finally on the table, undeniable and overwhelming. Their carefully crafted illusion of me as a failure had shattered, and for the first time that day, I allowed myself to breathe. I walked back to my table and picked up a neatly bound folder, its contents already prepared for this exact moment. My years on the bench had taught me to anticipate every possible move, every ambush, every lie. "Your Honor," I said, holding the documents high enough for the court to see, "I would like to submit 3 items into evidence: my judicial performance evaluations, my annual financial disclosure forms, and the custody assessment report prepared by Dr. Hannah Lewis, the court-appointed psychologist." Judge Brooks accepted the folder from the bailiff. Her eyes scanned the pages with quiet efficiency. After a few moments, she spoke. "According to Dr. Lewis's report, Ms. Carter has been evaluated as an exemplary parent. The report notes a strong emotional bond with her daughter, no concerns regarding her ability to provide consistent care, and a home environment described as stable and nurturing." A stir swept through the courtroom. Even those who had whispered against me earlier now shifted uncomfortably, realizing how wrong they had been. Chief Justice Cole cleared his throat gently. "If I may add, Your Honor, Justice Carter is among the most respected legal minds I have encountered in over 3 decades. Her rulings are cited in federal cases, her integrity is unquestioned, and her dedication to family law is unmatched. To imply she is unfit as a parent is not only inaccurate, it borders on insulting." I turned then, my gaze landing squarely on my mother. "What's particularly painful," I said, my voice firm, "is that these allegations came not from strangers, but from my own family, from people who never asked, never cared enough to know the truth. You assumed the worst of me and stood ready to destroy my relationship with my daughter, all while knowing nothing about my life." Linda shifted in her seat, her lips trembling as though she might protest. But under the weight of the silence, she said nothing. I faced the judge once more, my words steady. "For 15 years, I have dedicated my life to protecting children and families. I have ruled in cases that removed children from abusive homes, that ensured fair custody arrangements, that safeguarded the welfare of thousands. Yet here, in my own case, my fitness as a mother has been questioned by those who should have been my strongest defenders." The gallery was silent now. Even Daniel's lawyer had no words, his earlier confidence reduced to fidgeting with his pen. I stood tall, no longer the woman on the defensive, but the woman reclaiming her voice. "The truth is clear, Your Honor, and the truth is what I have always trusted this court to uphold." Judge Brooks placed the folder down with deliberate care, folding her hands before her. The entire courtroom leaned forward, holding its breath, waiting for her ruling. "Given the evidence presented," she began, her voice firm, "and considering the testimony we have heard, this court finds that Ms. Emily Carter is fully capable of providing a stable and nurturing environment for her daughter." Daniel stiffened in his chair, his eyes darting desperately toward his lawyer. His mouth opened as if to object, but no sound came. Judge Brooks continued, her tone steady and final. "Full physical custody of Sophie Wright is hereby granted to her mother, Justice Emily Carter. Visitation rights for the father will be supervised for the next 6 months, with the possibility of expansion upon successful completion of court-ordered co-parenting classes." The gavel struck once, the sound echoing like thunder. The gallery erupted in a mixture of gasps, murmurs, and stunned silence. I stood there motionless for a beat, the weight of years of judgment and sacrifice suddenly breaking free from my shoulders. Then I heard it, a small pair of footsteps rushing toward me. Sophie ran from the front row, her arms flinging tightly around my waist. Her little face pressed against me as she whispered, "Mom, why didn't you tell me you were a judge?" I knelt down so we were eye to eye, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "Because I wanted you to love me for being your mom, not because of my title." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "I think it's really cool," she whispered. "Does this mean you can send people to jail?" A soft laugh escaped me, despite everything. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but most of the time, it means I help families figure out how to take care of each other." Over her head, I caught my mother moving slowly toward us. Gone was her confidence. Her face was pale, her steps unsteady, her hands trembling slightly. "Emily," she said softly, her voice cracking. "I had no idea. I'm... I'm so sorry." I stood, my arms still wrapped protectively around Sophie. My eyes met hers, and for the first time, there was no fear in me, only truth. "You testified under oath that I was unfit to be a mother without knowing anything about my life, my work, or who I really am. You were willing to help take my daughter away from me, not because of facts, but because of assumptions. That is not something I can forget." Her lips quivered. I thought I was helping." "No," I said firmly. "You believed Daniel because it was easier than believing in me." Daniel sat slumped at the defendant's table, staring at the floor. For once, he had nothing to say. The balance of power had shifted completely, and the truth had finally spoken louder than the lies. 6 months passed like a season of healing. Daniel completed his parenting classes without complaint, and though the bitterness in his eyes never fully disappeared, he showed up for his supervised visits with Sophie. Over time, the court allowed him unsupervised time, but he never again questioned my ability to provide for our daughter. Some battles end not with fireworks, but with the quiet acceptance of defeat. My mother sent a letter to my office not long after the trial. The handwriting was shaky, the words almost pleading. She apologized, said she had been misled, that she had only wanted what was best for Sophie. I read it once, then folded it away. Some betrayals cut too deep to be mended with ink and paper. Silence, I decided, was my reply. Sophie, though, was thriving. She walked with her head a little higher, spoke with more confidence. One afternoon after school, she bounded into the kitchen and proudly announced to her friends, "My mom is a judge!" The sparkle in her eyes told me she finally understood why I had missed bedtime some nights, why the work I did mattered. For her, the truth was not a burden, it was a badge of pride. And for me, the truth became something I stopped hiding. I no longer brushed off questions about my work with vague answers. I stopped pretending modesty was the same as humility. For years, I had dimmed my own light, believing it would protect me from judgment or resentment. But all it had done was make it easier for people, even those closest to me, to underestimate me. One evening, as Sophie sat across the table doing her homework, she looked up and asked, "Mom, are you proud of yourself?" I paused, feeling the weight of the question. For so long, I had measured myself by quiet sacrifices, by the things I gave up for her. "Yes," I said finally, a small smile tugging at my lips. "I'm proud. Not just of what I've done in court, but of what I've done here, with you." She grinned and bent back over her notebook, her pencil scratching furiously. That night, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse apartment, looking out over the city lights. The trial had been brutal, but it had taught me something I would carry for the rest of my life. Justice isn't only something you deliver to others. Sometimes it's something you must demand for yourself. And when you stand in your truth, no matter how many lies surround you, the power of that truth cannot be shaken. The woman who walked into that courtroom feeling attacked and isolated was the same woman who walked out vindicated and whole. The difference wasn't in my title or my achievements. The difference was in my choice to finally let the world see who I truly was.